All right, that's episode 7 of Your Hood's a Joke. Welcome to everybody who's listening live and everywhere else. We got Gerry Hall in today. Hey, Gerry.
How you doing?
Good, good, good. Gerry Hall, comedian extraordinaire, comedian from Hamilton. I'm going to throw all these words out.
They're redundant from Hamilton. You're
Iranian women.
Somebody accidentally played the video there. Okay, cool. But yeah, so Gerry, you came in from Hamilton on a Wednesday afternoon. That's fun. It's a hot day, actually. I'm getting baked. I left this.
Pleasures of having a government job. I can just leave. Nobody notices.
Exactly. So, Gerry, you've been doing stand-up for 10 years. You've written a lot of the best jokes that we've had on Your Hood's a Joke. Thank you for that. Thank you for the free labor, comrade. And also, obviously, doing stand-up in Hamilton and in Ontario in general. Traveling a bit at all for comedy? Going a little
well,
further?
if you want to count Aylmer travel, yeah, I suppose.
Counts. It all counts. And of course, then you have your day job as a parole officer.
Yep.
Is that for Hamilton Police or provincial?
Yeah, it's for the provincial government.
Oh, okay.
We work closely with the police. And,
okay.
That's in Hamilton, yeah.
Yeah, see, that is slightly different from most comedians who don't have jobs or families.
Exactly.
It's very slightly different.
Yeah, lucky bastards.
Exactly. Damn, I hope your wife isn't listening to this. Oh, snap. I can't believe I used a line from the 70s.
Snap.
No, the whole hope your wife isn't listening to this part. So yeah, let's. So you've written a lot. Obviously, you've written a lot of the best jokes on Your Hood's a Joke as a ghostwriter. You've also been on several of our shows representing Hamilton.
Yeah,
we had the big show on Sunday night, Hamilton versus Thunder Bay. That was huge. Footage looks great. We're gonna post that very soon.
Oh, great.
So like we were talking before the show, a lot of the comics who've been on this show are, like I said, they don't have families. They're younger comics, newer, about 5-ish years, maybe 5 to 8 years. A lot of them not necessarily work on the road as much either, right? Focusing more in Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, Canadian urban centers. Contrast that with your experience where you're based in Hamilton. Right.
Yeah.
So do you do a lot of the shows in Hamilton, mics on a weekly basis?
No, because there's not as much of a scene in Hamilton. Obviously, I mean, even for the relative size of the two cities, where you'd say Hamilton's about 1/10 of the size of Toronto, there isn't 1/10 of the mics. There isn't 1/10 of the shows.
Okay, well, yeah, that's true. Toronto is kind of a outlier in that sense because there's just way too many mics almost.
Yes.
Not a bad thing. There's drawbacks. That's a whole different conversation. Merits and supply and demand. A lot of fantastic comedians have come out of Hamilton.
Oh, yes.
Though, right? So it has a comedy history.
There's some great despite the fact that we don't have the shows. There has been a lot of good young guys coming out. I mean, May Scaloni, probably the biggest example right now, just got a job working for This Hour's 22 Minutes.
Yeah.
And a brilliant writer, and started just about the same time I did.
Yeah.
And he's done 10 times more stuff than I've ever done.
Well, he's also like 12.
Yeah, exactly. He didn't have, and we talked before about certain encumbrances when you start later, you have a family and a job.
Exactly.
You can't go out and hit mics and be out there till 3 every morning. You can't do shows 6 nights a week because I think we were just talking beforehand. When I first started comedy, I became addicted to it. I loved it.
Oh yeah.
But I started coming in Toronto way too often to do shows because that's where they were. And my wife gave me an ultimatum. Said you can't be. You have 2 kids at home. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So you got to stay home and watch, be with the kids. And so instead of coming into Toronto like 4 nights a week like I was, had to cut it back quite a bit.
So what did she say? She's going to leave you if you don't cut it out?
That's what an ultimatum is.
See, that was like, I'm not married. So I'm like, what is a marriage ultimatum exactly?
Yeah.
I'm not gonna...
Well, it starts off with, certain things get reduced. Then after that, it could have. Honestly, if I decided that that's what I wanted to do, I think she might have.
Okay, yeah.
That's how serious it was because I was being irresponsible.
How long had you already been married before you started?
Probably 26 years now, so about 10 years.
Oh,
so
okay, wow.
What's 26 minus 10?
16.
Hamilton school system. About 16 years we'd been married at the time.
Okay, so So one day you started doing comedy, or you caught the bug, you're out doing comedy, and you hadn't expressed any interest prior to that during the course of your marriage, 16
No,
years?
not at all.
So it was just complete surprise to her.
Yeah, it was because of a friend of mine on Facebook had said he was going to try amateur night at Yuck Yucks. And so in Hamilton, I thought, I'll go see him and see how it works. And he bombed.
Of course.
But so did everybody else in the show.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, that'll be off my bucket list. I'll phone up. I'll get a spot in the next show. And if I bomb, great. I'll bomb with a bunch of other people. We'll laugh about it after, and that'll be it. It's off my bucket list. But so I phoned up, I got a spot on the show the next amateur night because, it was a bringer show. It just said bring 2 people. You're on.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So I showed up with my 2 people. They paid. And then when I got in, the manager goes, oh, I forgot I booked you. This is a Great Canadian Laugh House just for comics who have done it before. We've already got the spots booked.
Your first spot was at the Great Canadian Laugh Off?
Well, it wasn't supposed to be. He told me, he goes, well, I said I paid for my 2 people. He goes, I'll give them their money back. You can watch the show. But then he comes up just before the show, says, look, somebody didn't show up. If you want the spot, it's yours. So I don't know if it was the nervous energy or what, but I ended up winning that night.
Nice.
And going on to the final for Hamilton.
Yeah.
Now in the final, there were 6 of us in the final. I think I finished 12th. But it was good experience right off the hop. I was enjoying myself.
Yeah.
And so it caught my wife completely by surprise because she did not think I ever wanted to do. She knew I like to be the funny guy in group settings, and
especially if you get in the Great Canadian Laugh Off your first time, you make it through. Your ego must have been through the roof.
It was. I honestly, after that first night, I thought, I'm the next great comic out there. Yeah.
That's that part doesn't change no matter what time or age or setting you start comedy in. Everybody the first few days are like, this is fucking easy.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I was so convinced that this was now going to be what I was going to do for a living because it's such a high, and then you have your first bomb, and then you realize, okay.
And then you have several after, and you're like, crap, this joke that worked for those people out there don't work for a different set of people, even in the same place.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, comedy is, obviously comedy is hard. That's old news. But in Canada, the part of the structure of, I find, the comedy career that the most people have, right? It involves having some kind of day job, right? Or be a weed dealer or sell some drugs, But you have to have some kind of day job to finance your hobby, which you're trying to turn into a career. Even when it becomes a career, some people still keep a part-time job. They'll temp every 2 weeks, maybe, because that's the state of the economy. Not just the economy of scale. There aren't that many people in Canada to begin with, right? So in that sense, I mean, you already had your, you were working as a parole officer when you started, right?
Yes.
So you had that, your family, obviously. So with that, I find there is a certain amount of you're not stressing out over rent.
No, exactly,
right? Exactly. You have your house, you have your place, you got your kids, and you're doing shows. After a certain while, you don't necessarily have to do 20 shows a week every week, right? When you get your feet, when you figure out your voice, figure out your writing style, you can probably do with substantially less, and maybe ramp it up when you're going for a big show, showcase, gala, that kind of a deal. So that month or 2 months, you're probably hitting it every night. So, I mean, your setup is not dissimilar to a lot of Canadian comics who a lot of us look up to. They still, low key on the side, have some kind of job they don't necessarily talk about, right? And they spend their evenings. But the key is that they can spend their evenings doing mics because no family, no kid, etc. So that whole experience, I find that obviously a comic in that situation would draw from, but you don't as much. No. You don't draw from your family life.
Not in my act, no. I have a couple of jokes about having kids, but it's not very much in my act at all. And as a matter of fact, unless I'm doing a longer set, it really doesn't even come up at all.
Well, you like shorter, punchier jokes?
It depends. Sometimes I like to do just one-liners. I have I can do 10, 15 minutes of just one-liners that I have. It's like a set that I do sometimes, but it's more for fun.
Yeah. And that's what I mean. And that lends itself really well to a roast format, right? So when you first did Your Hood's a Joke a couple of years ago, was that the Thunder Bay battle? Was that the first one?
Yeah, the first one was Thunder Bay. No, the very first one, was me against it was Ottawa.
Oh, yeah, a while back. Yeah, I remember. Was that, I don't remember who the comedian
Kim
was.
Schneider, I think.
Oh, Kim Schneider. Oh, yeah. She's in California now being a lawyer
being a
and
lawyer.
having real money.
Exactly.
And you know what?
Not a bad gig if you can get it.
There's actually a little bit of cross-section of lawyers doing stand-up, considering that the art of writing and, being precise and concise with your words and delivering a message very quickly. That's what we have in common, right?
Yeah.
Kim's doing really well out there. Go, Kim.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so were you concerned that you might offend somebody? On top of that, you're a white dude, you've got your mustache, you're from Hamilton.
I look racist, let's face it.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, you have a disadvantage when it comes to audience perception in a roast show, or an advantage if you want to really dig in and play it. But were you worried about that at all?
I wasn't, because I knew that, and you do a great job, by the way, when you run the show and you put
Thank you. I am a genius.
Yes. When you put your advertisements out there, and when you introduce the show, you let people know this is a roast show.
Yes.
This is outside of normal comedy boundaries.
Yeah.
Nothing is off limits here. And as a matter of fact, the wronger it is, often the more funnier it is. And everybody knows that you're playing a character. It's meant to be absurd. You're not saying stuff you really feel. Except when I'm talking about Thunder Bay, I do feel every word of that. But so I obviously there's things you're going to say during a roast battle that you would never say on in a set. But no, I'm not worried about it, only because those sort of safeguards are in place where you're letting know. But is there a chance that somebody somewhere is going to still walk out of there going, I'm offended? And because I have a job as a public servant, that where somebody could say, that's why I won't ever say I'm a probation officer in the roast battle. But could that come back to bite me?
Hypothetically.
Hypothetically, it could. 10 years, it hasn't ever. But frankly, my regular material is not controversial in terms of I don't punch down. Comedy.
I've seen that.
But anybody can be offended by anything. That could happen.
Yeah, I never actually even factored in the fact that you are employed by the provincial government. So somebody could, in theory, be like, oh, I didn't like this thing he said, I'm going to call your employer. But I imagine in today's specific, atmosphere, that might not necessarily actually get you in trouble, because we've almost gone over that hump where people are now like, hey, you can't go after somebody's job every single time just because you didn't like one thing. What was the context here,
you got to let somebody earn a living. And, now, of course, there are times when, I do agree that sometimes if you are in a public job where you're serving the public, you can't say certain things because, you're not representing.
Yeah, I mean, when you take a public job, you do have an implied and not even implied, an explicit responsibility of representing the taxpayer who's paying you, right? So there's that. But I guess what I was trying to get at is it's different from, let's say, for example, the Louis C.K. situation, right? Yeah. Because the context here with your jokes is like, A, he's a comedian. B, he's doing roast jokes in a specific roast setting. C, if you didn't like it, you should have seen the 15 warnings that came on before this video or before he came to the show. So this is on The Observer. Yeah. Whereas someone like Louis C.K., that is who he is as a person. I don't know what your take on that is, but me personally,
I am against masturbating in front of people who don't want you to.
Okay, good. That's good to know.
Definitely on the con side of that.
That's good to know. But what I mean is, there have been some comedians, just general audience people or civilians as well, who've been like, well, how long is he supposed to suffer? Well, here's the thing. If your workplace had a dude who randomly jacked off in front of select, employees, and then used his power to blacklist them, used his connections to shut them up, then get found out, and even then not really apologize, but talk about how these people admired him. Like, that was his apology, was talking about how he disappointed the women who admired him. That's not sorry, but that's what I mean. Like, stuff like that, the context there is this guy's a broken person, obviously. On some level, he understands, not on some level. He is intelligent. He understands that this was wrong. You can't just whip out your dick and start jerking off in front of somebody just because they're there.
There should be some red flags that are going up when you even start thinking about that. As a
I mean,
possibility.
his TV show, Louis, his stand-up, all of that points towards somebody who was aware of his flaws, right? Very aware, almost like putting it up and being like, look, we're all like this garbage. Look at this. And it was hard to look at, but that was kind of like, well, we thought the dark genius of Louis C.K., you know what I mean? But then looking back, I'm like, this guy was providing cover for himself, essentially, I guess. I mean, maybe I'm reading more into it, but that is a kind of consequence where I guess people's wallets will end up doing the voting, right? If you don't want him to earn a living, for example, don't go to his shows.
Yeah, I think he'll come back. I think he's just too talented to not ever earn a living at comedy again. Because
he's still writing.
He's a very funny guy. I mean, let's face it, everybody, before we knew this, he was probably the most popular comic out there.
At least amongst comedians, in terms of pure skill level, he was revered.
Yeah,
even still is. I
like the way he told jokes. I like the way he just turned a very simple story into something very funny. But yeah, should he? You're right. People have a right to react however they want to react, and if they don't want to go see him, then don't go see him.
Yeah,
I personally would never go to pay a dime to see him now, until maybe he's financially compensated these people that he hurt. He can never take away what he did.
Like actually make amends. Yeah.
Something. Like
something. Something, exactly. Something.
And that, I mean, you can never maybe give people their career back. And who knows if the people that he did this to would have ever even had a career, really. You don't know. It's not, it's like players in the minor leagues, They might look like that potentially. You never know whether they're going to make it or not.
That's the thing. We will never know.
But they never had a chance.
Yeah, exactly.
Because of what happened.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
As far as I'm concerned, if he takes care of them, I don't know if any apology is ever going to be good enough, because the thing about apologies, there are always going to be some people who just don't believe you're being sincere, no matter what you say.
Yeah.
I'd rather see him pay with his wallet and make those people
some kind of amends. Yeah, because
it's
interesting you pointed that out, because when I think about it, some of the women and who came forward and plenty who didn't, many of them were like newer comedians. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, most of them were, in terms of authority and standing, way below Louis when these interactions occurred, right? So just imagine, and I know Dave Chappelle had this joke where he said, if that's what stopped you, maybe your will to be a comedian wasn't strong enough. Well, to that I would say, imagine going to a new job, fourth day at your new job, the VP starts jerking off in front of you or on the phone or whatever. Are you going to stick at that job? Like, you're going to be like, fuck this, I'm going to find something else. Maybe this isn't for me. I don't want to deal with this. It's contrary to popular belief. Most people, they're only brave after the fact, not in the moment.
Yeah.
Right?
We already know enough about, victims of any kind of sexual, this wasn't necessarily a sexual assault, but it was definitely...
it's sexually motivated.
Sexually motivated criminal activity. Let's call it what it is. But as far as saying that they should have they didn't have what it takes, if that was enough to stop them, that's just wrong.
That's just wrong. Exactly. These are people who, in an environment where they're like, oh, he's more powerful than me, nothing's gonna happen anyway, they're not gonna I can totally understand that. I think how many of us have not been in a situation where the boss's kid or relative said something extremely inappropriate to you or about your demeanor, and you're like, well, what, do I make this a rights issue, or do I just shut up and keep doing my job because I got bills to pay, right? That's a very human thing. It has little to do with your will. You have to balance out so many factors, right?
Yeah.
And it sucks because, like, I'd seen him live, 3-4 years ago, one time at the Sony Center. K. Trevor Wilson was opening for him. It's just a great show, just like start to finish. And I'm like, this is amazing. All these mind-blowing premises and, perspectives. And I'm like, God damn it. I can't even, because I'm one of those people, I instinctively cannot separate the art from the artist. That's my, like, if you tell me tomorrow, I hope this doesn't happen, that Dwayne Johnson likes to kill puppies, I'm just gonna kill myself. I'm like, what else is there to live for? No Dwayne Johnson in my life? Are you kidding me?
Puppies kind of being arrogant lately.
I know. With their cute eyes and their faces. But yeah, it's one of those things where I have a hard time separating the art from the artist, because if you're, when you're a creative person, you understand that so much of you goes into your work. That's just how it is, unless you're stealing material. It's part of you that goes into it, which is why when I think of Louis C.K., now I can think of this chronic masturbator who, without consent, essentially invaded all these people's, spaces and did all this. That's where all these jokes come from, right? So it's hard for me to do that. But like, you work in law enforcement, essentially. Is that something that's a crime here? Like, masturbating in front of someone who didn't consent to it. What is that?
It's not. Well, it would certainly be declared as indecent exposure,
right?
Because you're exposing yourself in a situation where privacy is not anticipated, right? So if I'm if I'm going to the washroom in some bushes in a golf course, and one woman looking for a ball happens to see me, that's not indecent exposure,
right?
Because I had a reasonable expectation of privacy,
right?
Or Louis C.K. didn't do that,
right?
He was so if they were saying I didn't want to see that, that's indecent exposure. That's a criminal act. In Canada.
That is a criminal act in Canada.
Even if it's his house. I mean, they were there, and he knew they were there,
right? So there is a reason.
Did something that he exposed himself.
Wow. So in the U.S., you think it's I mean, I don't know the penal code, but I imagine it's similar.
Probably, but certainly laws from state to state vary in terms of what the prosecutor would have to prove, and certainly there's probably also some degree of like we don't have a time period in Canada. A statute of limitations that doesn't exist in Canada
for any crime.
For any crime.
Wow.
But in the States, it does. Yeah. Sorry, man.
Damn it.
Damn you.
So many of my plans have been squashed.
Yeah, we don't have that in Canada, but they do in the States.
Okay.
In a lot of states, and it varies from state to state. And certain crimes don't have one, like murder. There's no statute.
There's no statute. Okay. But something like this, let's just put ourselves in the shoes of like a prosecutor or like a cop who, for whatever reason, is like, okay, this is what I'm going to spend my time on. Louis C.K. busting him. Would they have to prove all these things? Because right now these are allegations that he has admitted. Yeah. Eventually he admitted. So,
but in the court of law, he might not.
Oh, so he can take it back.
Well, no, not now. I mean, because they could use that. It's a public statement. But I mean, beforehand, if he were charged, he probably would have said, I thought that was understood, that it was okay. I thought she said yes. See, that's where the argument would come in. The prosecutor has to prove that there was a mens rea, that there was a criminal mind.
Right.
And if you can't prove that in an offense of this nature, it becomes difficult.
Oh, well, so in this case, it just literally would go back to the consumer, whether or not you want to...
It's up to the judge. The judge would then decide if there was a reasonable belief.
Yeah, so basically he's not going to face any kind of actual criminal or like, any kind of... It
depends on the judge. Honestly, it depends on the judge and the prosecutor. If it were to have happened here in Canada.
Right. Well, unfortunately, it didn't. Fortunately, it didn't, actually. Yeah. Hopefully, it didn't happen here. I hope he didn't expose himself to anybody in Canada or anywhere else going forward. But yeah, so now his comeback, he just literally it's just such a loaded word for this guy, but he just sprang himself on this audience because he probably knew, I mean, he definitely knew that having his name on the bill would, like, ahead of time, forget about it. So he just shows up, does his 15 minutes, gets apparently a standing ovation or whatever. I don't really care about that. Human psychology is complicated. Who knows what those people were thinking in that moment. So now that people know that he's out here trying to get his career back in stand-up, I wonder how they will react to actually seeing his name on the bill. Because if somebody goes... like, it's not like Louis C.K. is someone like Steven Crowder, for example, who's like a conservative comedian. That's his audience, right? We're talking about Louis, who is more on the left, progressive, like center-left, I would say, especially the last few years.
Really came across as disingenuous after all this stuff was found out.
Exactly. And it happened to have started when the allegations started to bubble up. Suddenly he's like, oh, I'm going to use my daughters as a shield and turn all my comedy into feminist comedy and whatnot. So that turn... coincided with allegations bubbling up a few years ago. So it's almost like a Gian Gomeshi or, Bill Cosby situation where the perpetrator is trying to create a facade so that nobody will even believe the victims, right? So there's that. But now we got, Louis C.K., who was kind of center-left, trying to get back in. I'm wondering if he will get the same support from the right. for the simple fact that the left, and I would say most decent people, don't like him as a human, right?
I think you'll get support from people who just remember him as a comic and they like him. And the tickets will be cheaper now than they were back when he was popular.
Better fucking me.
But I mean, let's face it, Bill Cosby was still selling out venues when the accusations had all come to the forefront.
That's
he
true.
was being sued, and he was still selling out. Like Hamilton Place sold out.
I was going to say he came to Hamilton. And sold out.
And some comics from Toronto came to protest.
Yeah, they did.
And,
I don't remember what ended up happening with that. Did they end up canceling that show?
No. The show went ahead.
Oh, right. It was reviewed by Rebecca Kohler, if I'm not mistaken.
I
she
think
wrote a
right.
fantastic piece about it. It was so funny. She's a great writer. So in this case would be, again, Louis C.K. put his name out, let's say he comes to a Hamilton Place or whatever. I'm curious if he would actually sell out, if he would have the same impact, what kind of people would draw, because so many of his sensibilities, so many of his premises require kind of a center-left thinking.
Yeah.
Right?
I think in Hamilton, I think he'd do fine.
Yeah.
I think it's a little more of a redneck blue-collar type town that they're not into a lot of the sensibilities that more, say a Toronto is.
Yeah.
I think he'd have a tougher sell here.
Well, yeah, so he would have to kind of adapt the way he had to maybe 20 years ago when he was like still not a household name, right? Because like doing comedy in an urban center, Toronto, New York, whatever, because of the demographics, obviously, it's not the same as doing a show in Hamilton, Burlington, any small town. I noticed that, obviously, like the first time I had to do a show out of Toronto, it was the worst experience of my life.
Where'd you do it?
Brantford.
Oh, man, that is outside Toronto.
That's
side of the human species.
Exactly.
I do a lot of shows in Brantford.
No, I remember before the show, because it was during there was daylight when we started the show, and there was daylight when the show ended. It was in a strip mall, not just in the strip mall, in the patio of a Greek restaurant in a strip mall.
Oh, okay, I know.
And across,
who was running that show?
I think it was the Rising Stars portion of Brantford Comedy Festival.
Yeah, it was Jamie Stevens.
Yeah,
who runs, and now that show is
that is huge now.
$10,000 grand prize,
and even the preliminary rounds,
which is prize in Canada, I think, right now, next to the Sirius XM.
Yeah, and even all the Rising Stars, their preliminary rounds in Brantford now are huge. They've got 400 or 500 people watching these shows.
They pack them
They're
in,
packed, but I'm talking about like the first couple.
No, I did some of those shows, and we were standing on the back of a flatbed truck.
Yes. The stage was a flatbed truck outside the quote-unquote venue itself, because obviously the patio couldn't hold the truck. Yeah. And I don't know if they did this to you, but when I came on stage was when the sun was starting to go down. So I'm on this flatbed truck outside the patio, right? Yeah. And there's the fence of the patios between you and the audience. Yeah. They turned on their fucking tiki torches right when I got on stage because it was getting dark. Now there's literal fire and smoke between me and the audience. Yeah. And I'm sitting there trying to do my dumbass lefty political jokes up there where there's...
Out in Brantford?
No. People were just like on their phones, looking away, There was... I forgot to mention the Stag Shop was behind.
The Stag Shop,
Yeah. I mean, there was all of that. I couldn't handle it. I was like maybe a year into comedy, right? And I was like, all right, I'll go to this show.
I was doing jokes about... prostitutes and killing.
Oh, right.
That's the type of stuff they wanted to hear.
Yeah, it was like a family restaurant, too, right? I'm doing jokes about pretending to be black on the internet. It was not going well. But I mean, that joke was me trying to get into a dating website. Like from start to finish, none of that worked for Brantford, Ontario. I'm talking about online dating, trying to get into a site that's only for attractive people, and then having to pretend to be a black supermodel to get into that website. And everybody, they literally, when I said the last bit where I'm like, I'm going to pretend to be black, people just crossed their arms and just sat back, be like, we don't talk about minorities here, bro.
And yet, oddly enough, when I first started, I was a much darker comic, and my struggles would often happen when I would come to Toronto.
Oh,
and because there were some audiences here that, and I've never done any racist material or anything like that. But sometimes I would, do a joke about cancer. Or
I heard it is dark for sure.
And there were some times, there were times when I just lost the audience,
like suicide jokes. I think,
because I stopped doing most of those. I've got a different sort of style now that's just sort of adapted to over the years.
Of course,
But I had some pretty bad
But those
bombs
at
here in
that
Toronto 'cause of
time,
that.
those jokes that were bombing in Toronto were doing well in Hamilton
Yeah, I
and
could do
outside
them
of
in
Toronto.
Toronto and in clubs they would do great. But it would be
Okay.
if I was suddenly, I don't know. I can't remember specifically
Some
which
hipster
shows, but
joint in the
some,
West End doing a
yeah,
mic on a Friday night,
yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly, something like that.
Yeah.
I remember there was a contest one time at there was a contest one time, and it was a good audience. At least I thought so when I went up there, because of, a couple of other comics had done really well.
Mhm.
But I started doing my dark jokes, and wow, that just did not happen for me at all.
Contests are a whole different beast altogether, especially because they draw people who otherwise would never ever have come to a show.
Yeah.
They're only there
Yeah.
to support their friend,
Yeah.
and then they're like, "Here comes Gerry Hall talking about suicide and
Yeah.
cancer." They're like, God damn it, Susan! I came here to support you," and he's reminding me of my mom who had cancer and killed herself.
That's a word I did not want to hear about.
Exactly.
Doesn't matter what the joke was.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like talking about that dynamic because so far on this show we've talked only about from one perspective, where we're talking about all these like diverse, cosmopolitan young comedians leaving the big city and struggling on the road. Whereas in your case, it was the opposite initially, where the road you were doing well in, and coming in here, you're suddenly like, oh shit, these fucking limp wrist hippies don't want to do me.
Yeah, and I probably should never have opened by saying that. That was.
Yeah.
But no, it was different. It was learning a little bit to what maybe worked.
Do you find
Didn't
that
have
you
to adapt a
switch
lot,
up, right? Like these days, do you find you have to switch up completely? Do you have completely different sets?
No, not completely different sets, but I know there are jokes that will work in certain venues and certain cities that won't work elsewhere.
Yeah, exactly. What about in terms of demographics? Let's say, like, for example, when I see a lot of non-white people in the audience, suddenly I know I can talk about certain things in like a whole different way, right? Where I don't have to maybe explain certain concepts because these people know implicitly what I'm talking about because we have the same experience, right? Do you ever switch it up in that sense? Even you might be in Hamilton suddenly, I don't know, the Indian Student Federation walks in, there's a bunch of brown people there. You know what I mean? So do you ever find that you have to switch it up because the makeup of the audience is different?
Not necessarily for me. I can
Yeah.
understand how some other comics may have to do that because of the nature of the material. Mine is not. It's so I talk about hamburgers and stuff like that. So a lot. It's not necessarily something that other people don't understand.
Yeah, yeah.
I will. I remember the one. There was a time when I used to use the word retard in a joke, and the joke was always good. It went really, really well. And then one time it was a yucks. It was like a Wednesday night, but it was full.
Downtown Toronto?
No, it was actually Hamilton.
Oh, okay.
And it was full I was surprised. It was
Wednesday night.
Yeah, it was a Wednesday night amateur night, and it was really full. I was like, this is pretty great. And they were younger people, and I used the word retard and silence. Then I found out that the entire group was the occupational therapy class from McMaster or from Mohawk College. And it was just, I thought it was going good, and then it was like I threw a grenade into the audience, just blew it all up, and I couldn't figure it out. I was like, well, what's the hell? And I found out after they were all occupational therapy students.
These days, that's still a loaded word because, there's,
I don't use it anymore. I took it out. It's I've changed 2 jokes in 10 years. I've changed 2 jokes.
Yeah.
Now, like I've written a lot of new jokes and dropped some just because I don't do them anymore. But in terms of jokes that I conscientiously changed, the one that used the word retard, I just took that part out.
Yeah, yeah.
It wasn't necessarily punching down, but I recognize that people don't like the word. The other was I had a story about using nursery rhymes on a blind date when I was in university.
Okay,
and there was one allusion that I would make. It was like a date rape illusion.
Right.
And it wasn't meant, and it never did bad. That joke never did poorly. I looked at the audience, and women laughed at it because it wasn't like an evil type of joke.
You weren't
just
making
like
fun of the victim.
It was a my God, how it was like an absurd type of joke.
Right,
it
right,
was
right.
like the line as part of the story. The line was, I knew the date wasn't going well because she wasn't leaving her drink unattended, and then I just move on from there.
Right,
and then it sort of said it so quick and fast. People were like, "What?"
No, because that's her distrusting you. That's the joke there.
But after a while, I just thought, you know what? I don't like it anymore because of sort of what's been going on. But I still do a lot of jokes I don't care if people like or not. That was one that I just took out.
Yeah, no, I've had a similar, like I've had jokes that, played upon the idea of like assault or like rape. Like when I was first starting out, you're a new comic, you're trying to be edgy and all that. Yeah. And I completely cut out doing any kind of rape jokes simply because the wrong guys were laughing at it the hardest.
Yeah.
You know, it was kind of like, I would never make fun of the victim.
Yeah.
Right?
But still,
no matter how clever you try to make it, how you package it, how you're trying to be like, no, this is actually about society, man. It was always the douchiest guys who didn't laugh at any of my other jokes about politics or history or whatever, but they would be dying at these rape jokes and fist bumping me after the show. And I'm like, you know what? Because as a comic, when you're doing your set, you notice who's laughing, right?
Yeah.
You're up there, you see who laughed at what, because you're going to make notes about that later. You're going to change them up. You're like, okay, this one didn't work for most of the audience. This one, only the guys laugh, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So you're doing that as you're doing your set. So I would always notice that rape bit was only this one particular kind of guy every single fucking time who didn't laugh at anything else but that. So I'm just like, you know what? I don't want to be part of this problem. And I also read something interesting that said that all rapists think that all men are like that. You know how all
that's probably
thieves,
true. Yeah,
all
they
thieves
probably
think that
think that way. I just haven't act on it, but yeah.
Exactly. So that's what made me think that when I say this kind of stuff, I am creating a connection between me and a rapist. And for someone like that, I don't want them to be fans of me. I don't want them to go around thinking that I'm like this, or even telling their other rapey buddies about this comedian who talks about putting things in women's drinks or whatever it is that they do, right?
Yeah.
So that was for me same thing. Like I just didn't like the exchange start to finish.
Yeah.
It sucks that I can't tell certain jokes about certain things, but it's not the worst thing on the planet.
And that's why roast battles are so good.
Well, that's the thing,
because that's where Bobby did a great joke about. No, it was Dave Burke did a great joke about the Hamilton. I forget the actual joke, but he said it's not like Hamilton Tiger Cats. It's weird because they don't have tigers or cats in Hamilton, but then again, they couldn't call them the Hamilton date rapists. And,
I actually wrote that one.
Oh, you wrote that one?
Yes, I gave that to
Oh, damn! That was one of the jokes he killed for him.
I also ghostwrite quite a few.
Yeah.
Like there was a lot of jokes.
I didn't know that was from you.
I don't tell
That's a
people.
great
I
joke.
just like, here, just use it, because otherwise, because I open with something about Hamilton versus Thunder Bay is basically the date rape Olympics.
Yeah, that was
right?
You did that on Sunday. Yeah.
Yeah, but I wouldn't ever.
That joke killed, by the way.
Yeah, people were just like, because it's we're talking about small towns, we're talking about dudes with very little sexual awareness and ideas about like how men and women are old fashioned, blah blah blah. So it's like a very quick thing. But again, that's something I will now only do in a roast setting, because again, we all understand this is outside of normal bounds. We're playing a character, and maybe sometimes we touch certain things, but we are just like, okay, that was just a joke, guys. Cool. But again, I find that that's growth as an artist, as a comedian, right?
Yeah.
Like to understand how you're communicating with the audience and evolving accordingly. I mean, there are also like the other side of the argument is, no, you got to do you, whether they get it or not. Whether they like you or not.
That's not very good comedy. If they're like, it's like, why are you saying I've got to get this message out? If the audience isn't laughing, then you're not doing.
If they
comedy.
don't want the message, it's like go to a political rally.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
For me, it was the opposite, because as a student, when I was younger, I wasn't doing comedy in my teens or early 20s, right? But I was just going to political protest rallies, things like that, and I realized pretty quickly that people don't like it when you yell it in their face, even if you're right.
Yeah.
Right? And comedy was a good way to get an idea across while, tickling their funny bone. Be like, actually, that kind of makes a point. So if you have a message, I find comedy is a very good way to deliver it.
Yep. For sure.
Yeah, but there's also...
I just don't have a message.
That's totally fine, right? You can do jokes, you can do jokes with a point, but at the end of the day, your actual job is to entertain the people who paid money to see you.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. Like, it's a very simple transaction. You might think of yourself an artist, that's fine, but even an artist has to pay their bills. Mm-hmm. So at some point, if there are no laughs, you're not a comedian, you're just doing really short TED Talks that nobody likes.
Yeah.
Right? So I would probably, recommend those people go there. Okay, cool. One more thing I wanted to talk about today. Kind of spent that time talking about Louis C.K.
Sorry.
I don't know if you can see on the screen.
Ageism in comedy?
Yeah, actually, no. I wanted to talk about Elon Musk a little bit, but we're going to skip that because that guy's a douchebag. Okay. But no, the ageism thing, something that people don't take seriously, I find, in entertainment. Well, maybe they do in entertainment in general. It's no secret that, after a certain age, women lose a bunch of roles. Yeah. Right? Definitely. Men still keep doing them. Bond can be 80, but whoever he's sleeping with has to be 25 or younger. Right? So it's a very real problem in acting, in entertainment. In comedy, I find it weird that age is an issue because you're not there as an actor who is supposed to look a certain way, right? You're supposed to deliver a certain idea, right? So, like, how has that affected you at all?
I wouldn't say it's affected me in any major way that hurt me, because I was never trying to make a living at comedy, because I had a good day job. I wasn't about to start going on the road. But there are comics, and Mark Breslin said this to me himself, because I've crushed every showcase I've done in front of him, and even to the point where he reluctantly put me on Wednesdays, because he just said, I don't know what to do with you. He goes, you're not culturally relevant, which means I'm a straight white older male, and I don't have a lot to offer, because he's already got a lot of straight white males and even older males on his roster, and he told me that they forcibly start retiring these guys after they're 50, which makes sense. And by forcibly retiring means you just get less and less gigs than you used to. There's a lot of young people coming up, and that can reach out and make connection with maybe different audiences than traditionally comedy tried to get.
Right.
Because stand-up comedy isn't what it used to be.
Of course, yeah.
The audiences, it just doesn't pack them in like it used to, because of the availability of the internet and everything else.
Everything, yeah.
You can get any stand-up comic you want to watch on the internet immediately. When I first started, when I was younger, like when I was 20, if I wanted to see stand-up comedy, unless I got lucky and it happened to be on TV, I had to go to Yuck Yucks, and you'd phone on a Tuesday if you wanted to get a ticket for the weekend. You had to phone and get reserve on a Tuesday. It was packed.
Wow.
It's not that way anymore. So they have to reach out to other audiences and stuff like that. And he needs a greater, not just he, but comedy in general needs a greater representation. And so, is it, whereas before comedy was an old boys club.
Right.
I mean, sure, there were people of color, there were women, there were LGBT people that were just so talented, they kicked the door down anyway, and they went on and they got accepted by their peers and they did well. But the initial opportunities were more limited.
Yeah, absolutely. I can tell you that. Yeah.
And so now if it's swinging the other way, that's a good thing, because we need more people to come out and watch comedy.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So let's have more people that they identify with.
I find that when it's not, at least in my experience, it hasn't exactly been a zero-sum game, because when you have newer comics trying different kinds of comedy, you've got younger, more diverse comedians, and also you have another subset of comedians who do inclusive comedy, something that is absolutely not offensive to anybody at all, right? And I find that when we add that, let's just use another example, Russell Peters from 18 years ago now, he broke down the barriers for guys like me, and in general South Asian people, to come to watch a show. Because you're not, okay, this guy looks like me, talks about things I understand, and I'll watch the rest of it too. So I find that it's not that it's taking over, it's just adding more people to the group of people who would watch a live stand-up show. Obviously, that group has been shrinking because of all the things you said. Internet, TV, availability of comedy wherever you want. But for example, I do both. Like, I have my own roast show, but I also do a ton of these inclusive shows that have sprung up everywhere, right? Yeah. And neither of those audiences really talk. There might be like a small 5% crossover of people who just want to see all kinds of things, right? But I find that kind of person who comes to a roast show generally is not the kind of person who goes to a safe show, and vice versa. So if anything, you got now two different sets of audiences. So you're growing the total number of people who are going to come to watch you. And as a comedian, it would benefit us to be able to do all styles. Yeah. You don't have to, obviously. Yeah. Some people like to do dark only. Some people like to do absurd only, one-liners only, stories only, blah, blah, blah. That's great. But I find that this is giving people an opportunity to expand their skill set a little bit. Be like, all right, let's see if I can make this person laugh using nothing at all that could ever make anybody afraid or offended, which is very, 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 very difficult. It's like doing a corporate gig, right?
Yes, corporate.
Exactly. That's how I
treat them.
Corporate
clean isn't even what it used to be.
Exactly.
There's stuff now you couldn't, you did a corporate gig, 20 years ago, you couldn't possibly get away with it now.
No, absolutely not. It was actually clean, right? So I find that all these different facets, styles, genres of comedy are helping revitalize an art form that had been waning I would say for several years, so like the issue of political correctness, nationalism, racism, heritage, all that we're collectively talking about every single day,
Yeah.
all of that has boosted comedy, because at the end of the day, people still think of comedians as truth tellers.
Yep.
You know, there is a little bit of that, okay, that person's fucking crazy and disheveled, and I'm going to listen to what they're saying. They've made every wrong decision in their life, but God damn it, they're right about the biggest things.
Yeah, I'm gonna listen to this crazy whack job's political views.
Yeah, exactly. This virgin who still lives in his mom's basement, but yeah, I'm sure he knows about tax policy. That'll be great.
Can't bathe, but
No, exactly. Won't bathe.
Yeah.
Won't bathe, but he'll tell you how to spend your money. But yeah, I find that, you know, this is overall, I'm a little bit more optimistic because, you know, more focus on comedy, more focus on what comedians say has made it more dangerous, and I kind of like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's more like there's a little bit more of an atmosphere in a club now where people are like, oh my God, what's gonna happen? He's gonna say something. Somebody's gonna pull out their phone and make this go viral. It adds a little bit of tension, which I like.
Yeah.
You know, it's prevented the art form from being too stale.
Yeah.
But that's us. That's our episode. Just timing that. Thanks for being here today, Gerry. Pleasure talking to you.
Yeah.
Anything you want to plug? Anything coming up that you want
I guess, well, I mean, not that it's going to make it in time for this podcast to be out there. I'm in the semifinals of the Comedy Brawl tonight.
Ooh, Toronto Comedy
ooh.
Brawl. I love that thing.
Brantford gives 10,000. Toronto gives 1,000. But still, I'll take it if I get it.
Are you the semis?
Yeah, semis tonight.
Nice.
And I don't have any friends, so it makes it even more difficult. But
No,
I've
that
won
is-
every week so far without bringing anybody.
That
so.
is a huge credit because, yeah, the Comedy Brawl is a bringer tournament. So comedians bring their friends who vote for them and they move on. And to make through with no friends in the audience is
Yes,
is
or
a
in
huge...
my life, yes.
That's a whole different ballgame.
So there's that. I get to open for someone I'm really looking forward to, Derek Edwards.
Ooh, Derek Edwards.
Doing a show in Aylmer, as I mentioned before. But yeah, there's a huge fundraiser they do every year there, and I've gotten open for I got to open for John Wing 2 years ago.
Nice.
Mike McDonald just before he passed away,
Oh,
unfortunately,
man, yeah.
last year.
Great comedians, yeah.
Oh yeah, it was fabulous. So I'm just I get to do my 15, 20 up there, and then they go on doing like an hour, and they just destroy. It's
When's
fantastic.
the Derek Edwards show?
That is the 30th of this month, September 30th.
Oh, Saturday.
Yeah. And
that's a Sunday. Okay.
I don't know. I know it's on my calendar. And the other is I am actually filming my own stand-up. I don't want to call it special, but I'm doing
Like an album?
Yeah, I'm
Nice.
headlining a show at the in Burlington. It's got about 250 people that are there. It's for it's a fundraiser for the Air Cadets out there. They always have a huge audience. So
And you're
I'm
gonna
looking
tape
forward
that?
to that. I'm taping that. I'm using a professional, two
Beautiful.
camera setup.
Yeah, looking forward to
Yeah,
it.
it should be a lot of fun. So
Awesome. All right. Thanks for being
All
here.
right,
Gerry
thank you very
Hall,
much for having
everybody.
me on, man.
Absolutely. And
Appreciate
till
it.
next time, see you guys later.